Quite a funky tune, really, isn't it?
Really good, yeah. I was just jamming in the background.
Oh, well, Ciara, lovely to be with you today. And how exciting. Oh, so excited. Our inaugural, our first ever green room for the Dartford and Gravesham Green Party. How exciting.
Yeah, our debut. How exciting.
So before we bring the amazing Zack Polanski in, share the viewers who might be watching live or watch this back. What are you reading at the moment? What's the book of choice?
I've just started reading this, so I don't have the most well-rounded review of it at the moment, but I absolutely recommend it. It's written by my wonderful friend Tori, and it's called It's Not Just You. It's about the relationship between the climate crisis and the mental health crisis that just comes along with that. So yeah, it's all about, so it says on the front, how to navigate eco-anxiety and the climate crisis. So definitely recommend this. It came out last week. Should get your hands on one.
Fantastic. My one is a bit more corporate-y because I'm still in the corporate space, and but it's called The Big Con by Mariana Mazzucato and Rosie Collington. And it's basically an expose, Ciara and Zack and everybody else, on the impact of big consulting and governments and how it literally, as it says, weakens business, infantized life, can't even say that word, but basically makes governments act like kids. We're seeing that a lot at the moment, right? And warps our economies. So let's bring the main human into the space. Hello, Zack Polanski. How are you this evening?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. It's very exciting to be here on your first show.
Yeah, we're so excited to have you, Zack. Thank you for coming.
Oh, thanks, Ciara.
Oh, it's been amazing. So we both had the pleasure of meeting you at the Kent Greens event last year, actually, Zack. And we'd just love for you as we get going today. It's going to be a very free flow conversation. But first of all, are you reading anything at the moment that you want to share with the listeners, or
as you were saying that, I have like an obsessive habit of reading lots of books at the same time, but literally today I've been reading this, which is The Impact of Inequality, which is by Richard Wilkinson, who also wrote The Spirit Level. And it's partly because I'm appearing with Kate Pickett, who is his fellow author of The Spirit Level, on a panel on Thursday in Newcastle. So I just wanted to make sure that was up on where their thinking was at.
That's awesome.
Phenomenal. Well, sorry, Ciara.
I was just going to quickly mention as well, Zack and I saw each other a few weeks ago at the Fossil Free Pride protest, which was absolutely fantastic. For anyone that didn't see it, it was protesting the sponsors of London Pride Awards. There were a lot of not so great sponsors. Zack, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, what an amazing energy that protest was. So there was like on one side of the road was this very, very corporate event sponsored by banks, fossil fuel companies. I think BP and Shell were involved, and also Macquarie, who are sponsoring the Silvertown Tunnel, which is a new big road building project I've been protesting in London. So you had that on one side of the road, and it just looked like the driest party ever, like just people with no huge amounts of joy kind of trotting into yet another party on the kind of corporate circuit. And then on the other side of the road, you had this most vibrant protest that was largely LGBT people, but lots of allies as well, just really saying that essentially community events should be community led. And all of these things are intersectional. So Ciara was just talking about a book around the climate crisis and mental health. And I think that's a very, very obvious intersection that's being talked about more and more, particularly because the climate crisis, as we all know, will impact the people who are least resilient to it and have frequently done the least to cause it as well. Whereas those who have done the most to cause it, i.e. the super rich, are often the people who can get away. They can literally move country or build flood barriers, or, you know, as Elon Musk carries on his empire, will be able to shoot off into space, you know, in I was going to say generations to come, decades to come, who knows. So I think it's really important that we draw all of those links. And I think that was an amazing protest where you had this kind of LGBT piece, which was all about social equality and social justice, but also talking about the fact that essentially we've got to keep fossil fuels in the ground, and no one should be greenwashing or rainbow washing the reputation of any marginalized community by promoting fossil fuels. So yeah, it was an amazing protest. It was good to see you there too, Ciara.
Yeah, no, it was really, really awesome. Like, it was really, really powerful. The energy, like you said, was just fantastic. It really was like the perfect grassroots pride is a protest energy. Like, yeah, and also BP and Shell ended up being dropped as sponsors, so that was a massive success for the community of people and all the different groups that showed up. So yeah, which Fossil Free Pride was just one of them. So yeah, it was really, 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 really amazing. And it was really good to see you there.
You make a really good point too, because so often we all go to protests. I'm sure lots of people watching this do, and we don't always win. And I think those are worth it anyway, because you're standing up, you're being counted, and you're making the argument. But it's especially sweet when at the end of it you go, wow, something was particularly achieved from that whole protest. Some of you will have been seeing I've been challenging the Mayor of London more generally around Pride, which is, you know, started off as a protest and has essentially become this huge corporate event. Now, I'm sure lots of people who aren't LGBT are probably thinking, well, what's this got to do with me? But actually, I think it's got to do with everybody, because again, it's a representation of something that should have been community-based, that should be led at the grassroots, which is everything that the Green Party believes in, being taken over by big corporate business, who are still keeping the community there. So this isn't me painting a false picture that they're shoving people out, but in keeping that community, they're making sure that the people involved in that community agree with them, or are the people who are the super rich, or at least connected with the super rich, and they're slowly pushing out any marginalized communities and any dissenting voices. And then when I took this to the mayor, he pretty much tried to ridicule me and said, you know, he looks forward to celebrating Pride with me, as if I was being this kind of big killjoy. But actually, I think it's really important that these things that are protests are kept as protests, and we keep that protest spirit. That doesn't mean we can't enjoy ourselves. It doesn't mean when I go to Pride I don't have a great time and enjoy the party. But ultimately, it's about making sure that the fundamental of what these things are about is always there. And I think the same runs throughout the Green Party too, that essentially we're a political movement that's there to get people elected. And it's been amazing to see more and more people elected as the years go by. And we're also there to do it with a spirit of fun and playfulness. So even though we're dealing with these huge existential issues that need to be taken extremely seriously, and are impacting particularly the people in society who are the most vulnerable, are being hit even worse off by it. Just being able to take a sense that actually when we're campaigning, we're enjoying it because it's about teamwork and it's about getting things done. I think otherwise we'll risk burnout if the entire time we're feeling like it's just too much because we're taking on these colossal big vested interests. But actually, again and again, we're seeing that we're winning, and we've cracked how to do this now. We just need to do more of it, and on a bigger scale. And I know Dartford and Gravesham have got some really good success in how things are growing, and Laura Edie is a huge asset to the whole party, frankly, but particularly in your area. Just I think the work she's leading on with the team there, I think, is giving a real demonstration of how it can be done, especially in places where, to speak frankly, wouldn't necessarily be associated with the Green movement. You wouldn't think straight away this is exactly where the Green movement is going to grow. But actually, again and again, there's a look around the country, South Tyneside, Burnley, and now Kent more widely, we're really seeing these green, I was going to say grassroots, they're not even green shoots anymore, because actually they're growing quite quickly. It's like a green garden of issues. And that's both about the environment and protecting the environment and nature and climate, but also, quite frankly, on these social justice issues too.
Yeah, 100%.
I love this so much, Ciara, and I think I'm sitting here, just want to offer a different perspective as well, an intersectional perspective, Zack. I work in the chemicals industry. I'm in that supply chain, right? That's my day job. And it's taken me a long time to wrestle with, do I get on the outside? Do I try and be a disruptor from the inside? And I find it really interesting that I truly believe that part of the party that we have, what's emerging in Dartford and Gravesham, is the ability to hold polarities, to work through these different intersectional lenses and hold that complexity, and not go, because you come from here or you work there, you're not welcome in the party. Is that something that you've seen over the years? Is that something that you're seeing continue to be embraced within the Green Party more widely? Yeah,
without a doubt. I won't name names because I don't want to put unfair pressure on different people around the country. But as I was just campaigning with candidates, particularly in the north, I can think of some instances. One place I met an amazing woman who's actually a plumber, and she was talking to me about her kind of conflict between the fact that she's often working with gas, and she's working on boilers, for instance, and wants that green transition, and is now a green councillor, but feels that kind of internal guilt about it. Someone else who was a driving instructor and said, you know, I literally for a day job am teaching people to drive, but then I'm trying to get traffic off the roads. I don't see any contradiction in any of those things at all. You know, if we had a green government and we had a perfect society, I won't even be churlish like that. If we had a green government and we had a society that was better than the society that we've got now, I don't think we're ever going to have a perfect society, because perfect for whom? But if things were a lot better now than now, when we had a wealth tax, so the super rich were paying their fair share of tax, if we were subsidizing train travel rather than subsidizing aviation, if we were making sure that public transport was as cheap, affordable, accessible and comfortable as possible, then I would say you have more grounds to say to people, oh, you've got to change your individual behavior because the cheapest option is green. And if you're not taking those options, then you're actively destroying the planet. But we know right now those systems are not in place. And actually, for far too many people, the cheapest option is often not the green option. And this is exactly our entire case about systemic change. It's not about pointing at individuals or blaming people or saying, look at your own behavior. This is about getting people elected to positions of power so they can hold the more powerful to account, they can hold businesses to account, and they can say, let's change behavior on a systemic level. Now, if individuals can change their behavior, so I'm vegan, for instance, I have the privilege and I have the job income to be able to do that and to be able to do that freely. And I would always advocate for that. But at the same time, I recognize that's a privilege I have that not everyone has. So my argument, for instance, again in London, is I'm trying to work towards plant-based meals, particularly in schools and in public buildings. That's not about saying everyone has to go vegan, but that's about looking at nutrition that is more nature friendly, that is cheaper and more sustainable, but also allowing people to make individual choices in what they do in their own home. And I think it's always about finding these balance about these things. I think another example too is I haven't flown for years, and people are, journalists are always asking me, when did you last take a flight? If I'm honest, the only reason why I don't fly is because I don't want a journalist to be able to catch me out and gotcha me. But even if they did, I always think, our party policy is not that people can't fly or they can't go on holiday, for their family holiday. Our party policy is about reducing flights and actually a frequent flyer levy. So your first flight of the year or first flight at all might be a lot cheaper than it is now. But then if you start to take more flights, it gets more and more expensive. So it's really aimed at the business people who might be flying several times a week. And we know that 20% of people are taking 80% of the flights, and over 50% of the UK population have not flown at all this year. So it's a very, very small amount of people who are taking up a lot of the carbon emissions. So anyway, to make this answer shorter, I don't fly because I recognize the position I have. And if I had to explain all of this on TV and radio, it means that I'm not being able to explain other things. So just to make life easier, I just don't fly. But actually, I will always defend someone's decision to fly if there's not a cheaper option. I think, domestic flights are different if the train is cheaper and there's different ways of getting around. But certainly if you're traveling around Europe, you're asking for someone, if they want to fly to somewhere in Europe, sometimes 3 or 4 days and several grand, to pay for it, whereas a cheap flight is about 60 quid. That's an unsustainable situation, and what we essentially need to be doing is making sure that we're sorting out our train systems and working across Europe to get a cheaper train system. If only we're in some sort of European Union.
Yeah, I thought that's such a good idea. You should recommend that. And you're completely right, Zach. Like I completely agree with everything you just said, and I think you worded it all perfectly. Like, it's a lot of these things are accessibility issues, and this is why I think people shouldn't be deterred from joining these communities for reasons like guilt, like climate guilt and things like this, the jobs they might do, the ways they travel, things like that, because we live in a society where the most accessible thing to do isn't necessarily what's best for everybody, and isn't what's best for our climate, and isn't what's best for communities that are being harmed by these being the only things that we can access, because they're things that make other people more money than they already have. Like, it's like, for example, I moved to Spain a few years ago. I can't remember exactly what year it was now off the top of my head, but not important. I moved to Spain, and this was when I'd stopped flying. I got there by coach, and it was northwest Spain. So it couldn't have been further for me to get to, unless it was in the south of Spain, maybe. And I ended up having to take 3 coaches to get there. It cost a few £100, same to get back. And because the coaches as well aren't timed to be like, okay, you can get this one and then straight away get on to the next one. It's like you end up in some random city overnight where you then have to book accommodation to stay so you can get your next coach to. And it was really, really long. I've also took coaches to Italy for different activism events and things like that. And that did, like you said, take multiple days. And the flights, by comparison, are almost always less than £100 if you book them kind of at the right times. And that's not the fault of the individual using the transport, that's the way the systems are set up. Like, that's what's most accessible is to some people that don't have the same privilege I had, to be able to take that time, to be able to spend that extra money, to be able to, you know, some people have got, you know, a few days maybe to go see a family member that lives in a different country, and they don't have all of this time to take out to do this like land travel as opposed to air travel. And yeah, it's huge accessibility issues. It shouldn't be things that put people off from being present in activist spaces they care about, that put people off of joining the Green Party or supporting the Green Party, because the world is not set up for us to be able to do the best things at the moment. And that's kind of what we're trying to fight for. You know, that's what we're trying to represent. Like, we're just everyday people as well, and we want to see these changes that make these better things more accessible to other people as well.
Yeah, and I think also the contrary is true as well. So I agree with everything you just said. And we should set this thing up so it both tackles the climate and tackles the cost of living crisis. We know the cost of living crisis is really an inequality crisis. So the super rich are doing totally fine out of the cost of living crisis, whereas the poor, working class people, people who are in jobs but are still on benefits, people who are on benefits who aren't in jobs, these people are suffering some of the most. We know that recent research shows that I think it's nearly 90% of people who are in work and claiming universal credit still can't pay for basic needs. So we're talking about rent, food, transport, but the options are so easily there. So, for instance, if we look at insulating every, I think. Can you still hear me? Maybe you can hear me now.
We can. Yeah, your connection wasn't grand, so it was a bit choppy, but we can hear you again now, I think.
So in very quick summary, I was basically saying insulate homes, because the cheapest bill is the one someone doesn't have to pay, and that's both good for dealing with people's bills but also the climate crisis. I think there's also a conversation about, we heard Liz Truss talk about growth, and then Keir Starmer this week was challenged by young climate activists about what he was going to do about the climate emergency, and his instant response, without even thinking about it, was, I'm on the side of economic growth. And it's just this idea of growth of GDP the entire time. But what about growth of well-being, growth of mental health, growth of connection with your community, your friends, your partners? What about growth of well-paid jobs and good unionized jobs, dealing with the gender pay gap, the disability pay gap, the ethnicity pay gap? All of these things are there to be dealt with. And I think we can deal with all of these things at the same time as tackling the climate crisis. And I think there's a huge opportunity to do this. But we just need to really challenge this notion that the only measurable thing is GDP. Because actually, if you think about GDP, if I go to if I've got a water bottle and I use a refill water that's out on the street, that's great for me, my health, and the planet. But it's not good for the people who are selling plastic water bottles. If I'm working outside, working out outside, that's great again for nature and the park and for me and the NHS. It's not great for the person trying to sell me a gym membership. So, I think it's not that GDP is all bad, and it's not that we should, completely knock any kind of economic measure, but that cannot be the only measure, and it cannot be the first and most important measure. We should really be looking at, how do we protect nature? How do we prepare for the digital age? How do we move towards a low carbon economy? How do we deal with racism in society? I think all of these things are actually much more important, measurable things that we should be working towards, rather than this obsession with just GDP. And so, to come back to what you were saying, Ciara, I think, again, yes, it can't be for the individual to take responsibility about that. It's about a whole different system change, about how do we look at society, who we were protecting it for, and what exactly we were protecting.
I'm almost emotional, Zack, as you share all that, to be honest, because where I work, give you an example, I'm not going to name, you can look at my LinkedIn profile, you'll find them. Very well-meaning people, as everyone is, like you just said, right? Everyone's in this system that's been handed down.
I've lost Garry now. I don't know about you, Ciara.
No, I can hear him.
Oh, yeah. it's probably best, Zack. It's probably best. No, it's just very, very quickly. I'm conscious we're coming to the last few minutes, but I'm just really wanted to get something quite practical, right? I'm working in a system that does absolutely is a key part of taking that money from basically those that are working really hard, siphoning it off, and it then goes to the shareholders, stakeholders, big oil, right? I'm in the middle of that beast, literally. And I'm trying to have conversations with people to say, hey, what's it like to reimagine, to look at something different, look beyond that conditioning that you've had for so many years. And people just get paralyzed. They're completely scared to even think creatively about what the future could be without this and that and this. What's your invitation? What's some of the things you say to people if you're literally like face on with someone that's completely paralyzed by fear? They can't imagine, they're not used to being creative. Have you got any sort of invitations for those people that might watch this back, for example?
I think you're partly doing it already, Gary. So it's in your question. I think the first presupposition of all is not to judge. And I'm not talking about the Green Party. I'm talking about the environmental movement as a much broader movement. But I think maybe in decades gone past, there's been like a judgment to it. And I don't judge that judgment. I can perfectly understand that as people get more and more worried and as the science gets increasingly clear and as there seems to be less and less action, I can totally understand why a big proportion of the movement just want to tell people what to do, to tell people to stop, using fossil fuels, to et cetera, et cetera. What I think has really changed, though, from my perception, certainly in the past decade, is a much more kind of understanding of this intersectionality and of a way of recognizing that we're all part of this, and this is actually a social justice issue. And again, that this can't be on. I think we still see it at COPs where some of the poorer countries get blamed and told they need to stop their fossil emissions straight away, not recognizing that in this country and across the West, we have a moral obligation that the post-industrial revolution, everything that we've benefited from empire, the conflicts we've caused around the world, we have an extra responsibility to reduce our emissions quicker than other places. And you just constantly hear this conversation, which is about finger pointing and judging others as opposed to doing what we can do. So I think, first of all, if you're with someone, to recognize that you're not putting all of this on their shoulders, you're not asking them to be the entire change. I think it's about, as a vegan, I don't want to say, how do you eat an elephant? But, I'll use the metaphor. How do you eat an elephant? One step at a time. You don't take the whole thing. So I think it's about having these conversations slowly with people and just getting them to think about what's going on in the world and how things might be done differently. I think one of the obvious examples for me is particularly people with children or grandchildren, although it's not just including that group. As someone who doesn't have children, I don't want to exclude childless people, but I think it's just easier if someone's got someone from a future generation around to point at things like air pollution, for instance. We know that there's streets that have some of the most toxic air across the whole of Europe. And again, these streets are often places that are poorer communities, working class communities, or have communities of ethnic minority people disproportionately so in them. And to have a conversation about what is causing this pollution and what cleaner air does, and the fact that there's places in cities and also in towns where children are literally growing up with stunted lungs depending on their postcode. And I read a fact the other day that in London, if you go from, I think it's Canning Town is the train station, for every tube station that you go to the east, you lose 5 years of life expectancy. Like, it's that dramatic. And I'm sure there's comparisons of that across the whole of the UK in terms of where people live and what their life expectancy is. So I think it's about making that real for people. And I think it's about engaging with the science. Now, engaging with the science is always difficult because my number one line that I almost want to say at any of these conversations is we have to listen to the scientists. And I believe that to be true, and I'll continue to say that. But we know we've got people like Michael Gove and Boris Johnson who have eroded that trust. They said we don't want to listen to experts anymore. And so I think there's this huge challenge for all of us about how, in an age of misinformation, do we keep people on board? How do we point out conspiracy theories, but without judging people and without pushing people away, but have conversations based on science and evidence? And I don't know of any way to do that other than through the human relationship. That's through knowing your friends, your neighbors, the people you work with. They're the people to have best conversations with. Now, that does create a big problem in politics, because when we go on TV or radio, we're not talking to our friends or neighbors necessarily. And I think there's a big mistrust of these people, politicians who turn up and talk at people. And I think that might be here to stay for a while. And actually, I think there's going to be increasingly a movement towards community politics. And I don't think that's a bad thing at all. And I think it's actually a really good thing for the Green Party, because we've always been a party that's about community politics. I'm here as deputy leader, but those who know the Green Party know well that we don't really have a hierarchical model in the party. So as deputy leader, my job is to listen to the members, to look at our policies that have been decided by every single member. It's one member, one vote, and then amplify those policies on TV and media. So it's not me deciding our policy platform, it's genuinely the membership. If you contrast that to the Labour Party, where 85%, I think, of the party voted for proportional representation, a fairer voting system, the unions voted for it, and then Keir Starmer said, no, I'm not going to do that. And that was considered normal politics. So I think it's probably quite a healthy thing that we're moving towards this more community, grassroots-led movement. But I also think that gives us a huge opportunity as well to build trust, to talk about information, and crucially, to not judge. The balance of all of that, though, is we are running out of time. And I don't mean that in an alarmist way. It's just a fact in terms of the clock is ticking. We have a climate crisis and we've got to move fast on this. So it's a way of having those urgent conversations that aren't unnecessarily scaremongery in terms of we don't push people away, but also at the same time, we're not complacent about it. And I think those are places where people like David Attenborough, actually people who are in that very mainstream space, who have started to talk more openly and explicitly about what's happening with the ecological emergency, is really important. But it's going to take more than just one person on TV. It's going to take all of us talking to people we love and people we know.
Just to give a quick shout out to a campaign that I think are doing a really good job of that. And one of their campaign tactics is, I'll say their name first, the Stop Rosebank campaign to stop the Rosebank oil field. Is they're doing a lot of work on social media platforms with collaborating with different celebrities that care about this issue, and collaborating with their Instagram accounts to like raise the profile of the Stop Rosebank campaign. And there could be a decision on that oil field any day now. There is a protest on the 15th of July. If anyone listening would like to come along to that, the details can be found on Fossil Free London's website and on the Stop Cambo website. Zack, I was just wondering if you were free to join that one, because we're going to be having a bit of a Dartford and Gravesham Green, massive there.
I'm pretty sure I'll have a committee on that day, but I will check. But it's because it's so soon, it's pretty difficult. It's always difficult when someone says, are you going to come to this? And like, there's everything that you want to come to ever. But as I'm sure people know, as well as being deputy leader, I have an elected role in London as a London Assembly member, and it's only right that I do those two things. But I think to say on Rosebank for a second, like, this is the most outrageous, like the fact that this is even a conversation. There is so much that needs to happen in this country right now in terms of moving towards renewables, investing in wind and solar and hydro and tidal and all of those things, in terms of making sure that we've got better active transport, that we've got greener jobs. At the very, very least, the biggest thing we have to do is stop the damage we're already causing, and certainly not exacerbate the damage we're causing. And the very idea that now is the time to open, new oil and gas licenses is just, it's beyond the pale, and it's something we have to oppose at every single possible moment. So yes, if anyone can get down to that, I would absolutely encourage them to. It's really, really important. Also to encourage people, though, if you're on social media, if you have a voice in your community, etc., just making as much noise as possible about these things is really, really important. I don't know if you want to repeat the date one more time, Ciara.
So the 15th of July, but I don't remember the time off the top of my head. I don't want to say it because I'm not 100% sure I'm right, but Fossil Free London's website and the Stop Cambo website will have all the information there, and on their social media platforms if you wanted to join.
I've just realised it's a Saturday, so I don't have a committee meeting, but I am at Croydon Pride.
Oh, well.
we need to be able to get maybe holograms of the way forward, Zack. We need different holograms of Zack all around the country. Last word to you. Sorry.
Well, I think you make a really good point with that, and I can make that my last word too. Is people talk about Caroline Lucas stepping down in Brighton Pavilion, and it's incredibly sad because Caroline Lucas is beyond phenomenal. She's like the most incredible woman who has such a legacy of work she's done and will continue to do outside of Parliament, I'm sure. But ultimately, it is not sustainable for one person or two or three people to carry an entire Green movement and be the only voices of the Green movement. So I guess, Garry, Ciara, you're doing this already by doing this broadcast, but anyone watching this, I think it's about how can we all step up where we feel comfortable to. And actually, again, we're a flat structure party, so we're not about just having one person turn up at places, but actually, how can we all turn up? How can we all show up? And so I'm not being ableist. I know lots of people can't turn up or show up, and they might have childcare arrangements or a physical disability, but how can everyone do it in their way? Is there more social media we can be doing? Is there more kind of broadcasts like this? Can we be facilitating conversations? Can we be working on the ground to get people elected? Because I think fundamentally, the biggest change we can ever make is by making sure we've got Greens, both as MPs at the national level, but also in local councils too, whether that's district or local, because ultimately people being able to vote on decisions and hold the powerful to account is exactly how you get change. So if anyone's not in the Green Party, I'd obviously encourage them to join. But if you are in the Green Party already, I'd just encourage you, if you can get involved with a local campaign, ultimately getting Greens elected and seeing the difference a Green makes in the room is one of the most powerful things you can do, both to tackle the cost of living crisis, but also the climate crisis too.
Wow. Ciara, we've come to the end. We've come to the end of our inaugural. I would just love to do a quick checkout, if I may suggest, starting with our wonderful guest, Zack, then you, Ciara, then myself. What are you taking into your evening, Zack? How are you feeling? What's the vibe? How are you feeling after this first 30-minute green room experience? Because we want to do more of these, right, Ciara?
100%.
I'm feeling good. It's always good to chat with people, and I think it's, although these are things I say a lot, it's always good to kind of say them, because it reaffirms everything you believe and everything you know, and also just knowing that there are lots of people all over the country who are having these similar conversations. In fact, not just over the country, over the world, and we are more than the sum of our parts in terms of this is a big global movement, and ultimately we can do this. And even in the adversity of all the obstacles and all the vested interests, ultimately we can and must win. So how am I feeling? I'm feeling good.
Yeah, I'm feeling joyful and energized and inspired. I'm just really happy to be in a party that cares about all of these things and represents all these different communities. And yeah, I've really enjoyed being in this space with you both. And yeah, thank you. Thank you for being here as well, Zack. Thank you for being our first guest.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for organising.
Oh, it's been amazing. And honestly, thank you, Zack. Thank you, Ciara. And for me, again, I use this phrase when Laura Edie got re-elected. And by the way, Zack, I want to share this with you before you go. When we were in the election hall, like the count, as they counted, every other opposition party said, this wasn't you didn't keep this seat. This was actually a gain, because Laura, of course, was elected in her own right as a Green. That sent shockwaves across Dartford. That literally sent shockwaves across Dartford on that day. So I think we're in a good space.
I think that sends a really good message as well to those people in Labour who have not been happy in Labour for a long time, that if you join the Green Party, we will defend your seat and you will win it again. Obviously, those are to people who share similar values. It's not that I'm looking for everyone to join the party, but I think there's lots of people in the Labour Party who do probably share our values, who are really unhappy with the current leadership. And I think it's really, really good time to join the Green Party.
Well, from a local perspective, we can say you're 100% right. That has been the energy. Yeah, it's been amazing. Yeah, and I think people really believe that Greens are an option in Dartford and Gravesham now, because of Laura's amazing win. Yeah, so yeah, it's a good time to be a Green. It's always a good time to be a Green.
Especially right now. Thank you, Zack. Thank you, Ciara. Thanks everyone for watching. If you watch this live or we watch it back, have a great evening all. Take care. Bye.
Thank you.
And you, Garry. Bye.